What's up, YouTube? Welcome back to Whispering Willow Farm. I am so excited to hang out with you guys today and talk to you about something that I have been getting this question rolled in quite a bit for a while now. So this video is super overdue, but I get asked all the time what amending your beds look like. Why do you amend your beds? What do you amend your beds with? The purpose of it, the benefit of it, all of those things. So today, that's what I'm going to talk to you about. I have just this week went in and amended all of my beds, getting ready for my fall planting. So I thought it'd be a really good time to just show you guys what I am personally using, and then a lot of really good options depending on what your soil needs. So by definition, like amending your soil, all that really means is it does not have to be complicated at all. It means that you are adding things, you're adding organic matter, you're adding fertilizer, you're adding X, Y, or Z to your soil, mixing it in to help the physical property of your soil. So you're going to add all these things because if you continue to plant in your bed year after year, you don't ever add anything back to it, you're draining your soil of all these nutrients. I like to look at it like, okay, if I feed myself good nutrient-dense foods, then I'm going to be able to have more energy throughout the day. I'm going to be able to thrive and go about. If I, one, don't feed myself anything, I'm going to have no energy. I'm probably going to be a little moody, just not good, right? Same with your soil. Like, I think if you're feeding your soil good nutrients, good fertilizer, things like that, then your plants are going to thrive. They're going to produce more fruit. They're going to have healthier lives. And so when I was trying to learn about soil amendments and things like that, I literally always just kind of like compared them to me. Well, you know, I want my plants to live the best life possible. I want them to be good, healthy, established plants that produce a lot of fruit, that don't have a lot of disease. Granted, some of these things are, you know, you just can't help. Y'all know I had like a crazy squash bug problem this year, and some things are inevitable and they just come back. But you cannot just keep depleting your soil of all these nutrients and never adding anything back into it. A good rule of thumb that I always go by is, so after my fall and winter things have come out of the garden, I'm going to amend my bed, maybe with some compost, some different organic matter. The thing is with amending your bed is you don't want to disturb the soil a whole lot because you're messing with the ecosystem that is going on in your soil. So you do hear a lot of times, don't disturb the soil, don't disturb the soil. And that is 100% true. So say you aren't planting for fall and winter and you just had your summer garden and you rip it up. I would encourage you to lay all your amendments down on your bed that you're going to cover it, and then just let that break down over the course of the entire winter. If you do that, all those nutrients, whatever you use to fertilize, it is going to break down in the soil. And when you get ready in the next spring to plant, you're going to have really good nutrient dense soil. Now, if you're like me and you plant all the seasons, then what I do is I will top dress my bed with my fertilizer. I would recommend using like a broad fork. That way, what the broad fork is, you stick it in the ground and you'll pull it either towards you, and you essentially let the fertilizer fall in. So you're not messing with the soil a whole lot, but knowing that it is necessary but not to overwork your soil is really good. You can even take some sort of like pitchfork and barely just, you know, work it into the top of the soil and then water it really well. So be keeping this in mind. For me, I usually fertilize and amend my beds before each new planting. Now, if I see that it's needing something else, I would recommend maybe making some sort of compost tea and being able to just spray that where you're not having to disturb the soil. Ultimately, you have to figure out what's going to work best for you and your plants, and also respecting the soil to where you're not messing with it too much. So let's dive into what do you amend your bed with. I would recommend getting a soil test. Everybody's soil is different, and that is going to depend on how you sourced your soil originally, what is it made up of, your climate, your zone, things that you deal with that maybe I don't deal with. Everyone's soil is totally different based on where they are, and that changes in so many different ways. I would recommend a soil test. We did this in the high tunnels and it was super beneficial. because it showed me that our soil already had pretty good nitrogen levels. So instead of me jumping in and adding all this nitrogen to my soil, maybe I should have been adding some more calcium or something like that. So instead of just wondering, what does my soil need, it breaks it down for you and tells you exactly all the levels of your nitrogen, your phosphorus, your calcium, everything in your soil. It's super, super cool, and for me, I just like going over that and having that as a reference. I think it would be cool a few years down the road, like, okay, this is what my soil started with. I worked my hiney off, and this is my end result. And I think it would just be really cool to like physically see that. I'm one of those people, like, I thrive off of that, like knowing the work I put in like actually did something. You may be like that, you may not, but just knowing what your soil needs is going to help you determine the type of fertilizer that it needs. Our local extension office does it, and in my county they do it for free. I have been told by a lot of different people that their county, if you're a taxpayer, it is free, or maybe they charge $10. Still, even if they charge you a small amount, it is 100% worth it because of how detailed it is, and you can know exactly how to meet the needs of your soil. Alright, so let's dive into the options that I recommend. Some that I've never used before, but I have heard wonderful, wonderful things about. I have updated my Amazon storefront of all these different fertilizers just to give you guys as a reference. I encourage you though, read them, figure out what you think your soil needs based off either the soil test that you did or just signs that your plant are showing. But yeah, let's dig in. I'm excited to show you guys. One thing that I wanted to mention too, because this wasn't actually on my list, and then a viewer had sent me an email and I was like, this is genius. This is why I love you guys, because some things that I may just overlook or miss, like super simple things, I'm like, I'm about to talk about all these fertilizers. I'm missing like probably the most beneficial one and the free one. So when I did the rabbit video, someone had emailed me and said, hey, like your rabbit poop would make great fertilizer to amend your beds. And I was like, you're right. Like, why did I not think about that? And that was one of the biggest benefits whenever I got rabbits, was knowing that I could use their poop as fertilizer. Now, what I plan to do, because I just don't love the idea of like animal poop sprinkled on your beds, which is totally fine. You guys know, like, my sweet little Ivy June is out here with me a lot, and I can just imagine that is not something that I want to have to deal with. So I have been researching. You can make rabbit compost tea, and essentially you break it down and you'll spray it like around your plants and in your beds, and I really like the idea of that. Same if you are keeping worms. I know a lot of you guys have dug into that. I think it's really cool. You can make worm tea out of their castings, and it is super crazy beneficial. If it's something you guys aren't doing and you're starting the school year, like, this is going to be a project for me and my kids, so I really recommend it too. Just trying it out, the whole thing, keeping worms, making their little worm bin, then making their poop into tea for the garden. I just think it'd be a really cool cycle to teach your kids, and then it's crazy beneficial. So if you have rabbits, if you have worms, use those free resources. That is one of the benefits of having those things, is that their poop is super beneficial. So this is what I had already amended most of my beds with. I have it in a mason jar. Maybe it won't come out. And this is feather mill. And what feather mill is the ground down feathers of poultry. It is really high in nitrogen. It's got phosphorus, I believe. Now, I've never used this as a fertilizer. I've never used feather mill before, and when I was getting ready to plant in the tunnel, one of my friends who farms for a living was like, we have really high success with feather mill, and I have a lot of extra, would you like to just try it? And I did in the tunnel, and my plants are thriving, and I thought, wow, maybe I need to try this at the garden at home and just see. So I had some bean plants that I had planted, some bush beans, and their colors weren't looking great. They had just looked like kind of maybe they were stunted. I'm not really sure what was going on. Maybe the lack of me watering and not a lot of rain lately. So I went through and I sprinkled these on the top, which is exactly what you're going to do. I'll show that in a minute, like how I amend them. Within a 24-hour period, these plants took on the most green, lush color they're starting to put off beans. It was one of those like visual things where I was like, wow, this is actually like feeding my plants and like doing things, like good things for these plants. And for me, I like seeing that, you know, I like seeing that what I'm doing and putting in my soil is actually really helping my plants. I didn't realize that it would be such a quick thing. I had no idea within like 24 hours I would already see a difference in my plants. And that may not be the same for you. I'm not sure. That it was just like an aha moment. I was like, whoa, this is crazy. So what I do, I'm just going to show you guys real quick before I move on to the next fertilizer. I typically always use a mason jar, no matter what it is that I'm using. I'm going to go through and just sprinkle it on top of my soil. These are actually the beautiful lush green bean plants I was talking about. And if you guys could have seen them, they were so yellow. I don't know, they just weren't thriving. And I was like, man, I really was hoping to get another round of beans. Like, what is going on? And now they're just this beautiful lush color. And what I'm doing is just literally top dressing the top. I'll go back in. I don't have my broad fork here, so what I'm going to do is I have like a pitchfork type thing. I'm just going to go in and lightly pitch the top of the soil, let all that fall in, and then I'm just going to go back in and I'm going to water it a lot and let it just soak in the soil really good just through the water. So I just want to go into like what the Feather Mill does. I told you that it was high in nitrogen, but what it does is it works with like the bacteria and the nematodes in the soil to help break down the nitrogen component so that the plant can easily absorb all those nutrients, which I think is really cool. Is it's helping the soil help absorb all the benefits of this amendment. All right, next up we have got Bone and Blood Mill. This is the high yield brand. I haven't actually used this. Well, I used it for my starts in the spring. They were having major like phosphorus deficiency. The leaves were starting to turn purple, which is a sign of that. And I added a little bit to each of my starts before I got ready to sell them. And literally within like a 24-hour, all the purple toning had completely gone. It was great. Now you can buy just Blood Mill and you can buy just Bone Mill. This is what my local co-op had. It is not organic. So down below, I have linked organic brands. If you are certified organic or certified naturally grown and you're needing like an organic fertilizer, by all means look into that. This didn't have anything in it that, I mean, this was fine personally. There was nothing in it that was bad. This is a 6-7-7 ratio. I think you'll see with a lot of them, they're like 12-0-0 or 13-0-0. And so I recommend finding which brand you can source out, which one you feel comfortable with. Me personally, I'm okay with this. I've used this in seasons past. It does well. I was able to support my local co-op. So just figure out what works best for you. And again, Bone and Blood Mill are the byproducts of animals that have been grounded down. And they work really, really well. With Bone and Blood Mill, when you fertilize your plants with them, even if you already have established plants in the ground and you just want to add this to the base of them, it helps those plants be stronger, be a lot more productive. The benefits of Blood Mill in your garden, I have always, this is the first time that I bought the two together. I usually just buy Blood Mill. But Blood Mill is a fantastic organic just amendment that I feel like at some point or another, like your beds need all the benefits that are going to come from Blood Mill. So the Blood Mill also works with the nematodes and the bacteria in your soil to help break it down. That way your plants can absorb the nitrogen better and the benefits of it better. So that's very similar to what the Feather Mill was. And by adding that level of nitrogen, when you go to plant, you know, all of your fall things in there, or if you're doing this, you know, in the spring for your summer garden, you are creating like that high nitrogen, which is going to make your plants lush and green like what I had showed you guys. And it's just going to kind of boost them. I've noticed that when you use this, when you're transplanting out starts, it just makes your plants go off on the right foot. They are stronger, they become more established, they produce really well, they're that green lush. Now if you already have established things in the ground, this is always also a really good option because it helps with spotting and wilting, and just if your plant's looking like it needs a little love, I would probably grab the blood meal first because it is such a fast reacting boost for your plants. I will note though that all the nitrogen in the blood meal can make your soil slightly acidic, which can be great for plants that thrive in that acidic environment. But if you have a bed where you're planting a lot of things that do not love the acidity, maybe try and go with a different fertilizer option. Alright, let's talk about Kelp Mill. This is one that I actually don't have, but I have ordered it and it is on the way. So Kelp Mill is great for a range of reasons. It makes your plants stronger, healthier. It helps them resist like pest and disease problems. And also if you put, so this would be really good for like a root vegetable bed. So your beets, your carrots, your radishes. So if you put Kelp Mill like around where you're going to plant root vegetables, it's gonna help those roots develop faster and form faster, grow faster, be healthier. So I think it's a really good option for the fall garden, especially when you're doing a lot of root vegetables. It's also really good at breaking down the soil, and that is one of the benefits of all these different amendments, is in some shape or form they are all going to help, you know, break down in your soil to help your plants receive all the nutrients from the amendment from the soil. So that is a huge benefit when you think of all the things that are going on with all these different fertilizers and all these different amendments. It's actually really cool. You guys know I think nature is flippin' awesome, and the fact that we've got these resources and we have these resources and kelp mills and all these different things, something simple. I mean, it would take me, depending on how big your garden is, obviously it could take a bit longer, but in 20 or 30 minutes you can amend all of your beds before you planted in them, and you are adding all of these benefits and nutrients. You're helping the soil receive all these nutrients, therefore your plants are going to be able to receive them easier and better. It just seems like a win-win for everyone. Now, the most important one that a lot of you guys, I wouldn't say it's the most important, but one that a lot of you guys have readily available, and I'm all about using the resources that you have, is compost. You can go back in and lay 1 to 2 inches of compost that you have been saving from your on your farm. We've got compost bins here. We've got a huge compost area. As long as you are doing all the things to that compost that need to be done, like adding the water, turning it, making sure you're not adding things into the compost that don't need to be there, that is a good, I'm sure there's already like earthworms living in there. There's already like this happy little eco environment that you're going to take and then add to your beds. I think that is really, really important, is to top dress, your beds with compost, especially if it's something that you have been putting all this work into and this time into. I think that that's really rewarding for me. Like the first time that I got to amend my beds with compost that I'd been like working on all year, it was such a feeling of like, man, I did this. Like, instead of going to the store and buying this amendment, like I did this in our backyard just from being intentional and a few extra steps. And for me, like, I think y'all know, like, I need those little wins to be like, yes, Jill, like, keep doing it. And for me, that was one of those easy little wins that was just really, really cool for me to experience. All right, you guys, that wraps up some of the amendments and fertilizers I was going to show you guys to amend your beds this season. Granted, this is not all of them. I just touched base on a few of them. That is why I went through last night, updated my Amazon storefront. That way you guys can go through. I know that like Fox Farm and Happy Frog, those are some really good organic brands. It's hard for me to find those here in Arkansas, so maybe depending on where you are, I know that that's like readily available in California. So just sort out which organic brands you feel comfortable with. Maybe it's just going to your local co-op and buying the high yield and supporting that local business. There is no right or wrong way to do it. I think the fact that you are being intentional to amend your beds and make sure that you are putting life back into your soil says so much. You guys are definitely on the right track, doing what needs to be done to make sure that you have the most successful growing season, which in my opinion is really all that matters. But I hope this video was helpful for you guys. As always, if you have comments, leave them below, and I'll talk to you soon.